ticket to an insane asylum. I was very concerned. John tried to assure me that this was not this was not his intention, that he just wanted to help her, get better so that she could be better prepared for trial. But I wasn't convinced that this was so. And so what I did was I hired a very highly respected forensic psychiatrist, Dr. Mark Mills, to go to Spring Grove Hospital and do an evaluation of Valerie, a private evaluation, because I suspected that their doctors would make anything up and they just keep her there. But if there was an independent physician, psychiatrist, forensic psychiatrist with a report that perhaps contradicted the Spring Grove doctor's report, that this would help us to get her out of there. So Dr. Mills duly conducted his evaluation of Valerie, and he found her to be sane and competent to stand trial. And then miraculously, the Spring Grove doctor came along and did his evaluation and concurred with Dr. Mills's opinion, and Valerie was sent back to jail. At this point, we were very afraid for her safety and well-being because the attempt to have her remain in the insane asylum hadn't worked. And meanwhile, we were very upset with her public defender because we perceived this as a betrayal of her. This prompted me to write a complaint to the Attorney Grievance Commission of Maryland against Valerie's public defender, and the reason being that he had pled his client NCR without her knowledge or consent. The Grievance Commission actually contacted Janowicz and basically held his feet to the fire in the sense that he had to account for why he had done all these various things. And so there was he had some sort of exposure. I got a letter from them kind of basically saying, because of attorney-client privilege, we can't really communicate with you on this matter, and that if Valerie has a complaint, she should write to them. But at that point, we thought that Janowicz was shaping up, that this had kind of scared him, and he was apparently appearing to work harder towards working on Valerie's defense. It was during this period that I worked actually very hard, and others did as well, to develop the defense materials. I viewed the videotapes of the children's interviews. I analyzed them very carefully. I listened to them. The sound was very poor, so I had to spend a lot of time trying to hear what was being said. I actually had portions of the sound enhanced because I suspected I was hearing something, and I thought that was very relevant, and it turned out that it was. The child who made the so-called disclosure, actually, she's being led, to say certain things, and at a certain point, she doesn't say the right thing, and the interviewer sort of corrects her and said, "But you said thus and such," and she says, "Oh, hold on, I'm lying." And I thought that was very relevant, because you can see how the kid really isn't sure of the story she's supposed to tell, or she starts to tell one story and then ends up telling another story. So I took note of that and of other features of the interview, and I had, and Dr. Mills agreed that he would actually evaluate the interviews and write a report on them, which he did. So we actually were very confident that we had excellent defense information, that Valerie was going to be acquitted, and that all would be well as long as she could get to trial quickly. But that didn't happen. The trial was postponed several times, and the the most, well, not the most recent one, but the one that really kind of got me fed up was the postponement in early January of 2010, just about a year ago, after she had been incarcerated for about 7 months. And at that point, I realized that, you know, every day that went by, her life was in danger, and the court could continue to postpone the trial indefinitely, and had done so in some cases, giving them ample opportunity to continue torturing her until she pled the way they wanted her to plead. So that is when I decided to put up the Hostage Child website. That was January a year ago. And what I did with this website was, the website basically presented Valerie's case and presented the prosecution's information, which you would think they would have been happy about, because there I am, you know, showing what they have against this defendant. But they weren't happy at all. And in fact, within days of the website going up, the state's attorney made an attempt to gag me. And he did this by going to the judge and asking him to exercise jurisdiction over me and make me a party to the case of the state versus Valerie Carlton, which of course isn't legal and can't be done, and it wasn't done. But it kind of indicates the degree of chutzpah that this man had, you know, in an attempt to misuse the law, or use the law in a way that it couldn't be used, to get me to shut up, basically. So the Hostage Child website continued. We continued to post new information. One of the things we did was we set up a web page where we analyzed the early press reports that had come out in the initial period after Valerie's arrest. What had happened was the public defender went to the media and gave the media lurid accounts of what allegedly happened, none of which were true, and most of which were not even in the charging documents. So we don't even know to this day where some of these stories came from, other than the prosecutor's own fantasy life. For example, you know, they said to the media that that Valerie had given baths to these two little girls, and while they were all bathing together, she forced them to perform sex acts on each other and on her. That wasn't in any of the interviews, not in any of the charging documents, nowhere. We don't know where that came from. And stuff like that. But as you can imagine, it really got the public riled up, and they completely believed that she was a dangerous pedophile, and all kinds of hideous comments were posted on the internet about her. So we decided to challenge those, and we picked these stories apart piece by piece, showing where the lies were, etc. That was one thing we did with the website. The other thing, as I said, we put up the children's interviews with the names redacted, and I also put up the piece where the one child says she's lying. I actually included the audio of that, and, you know, general descriptions of Valerie's case and the events leading up to her arrest. A lot of stuff about Gendelman, my affidavits in which he told me his plan to have her incarcerated so that she could get mental health treatment, and much else. And then I also started putting up cartoons and humorous little sort of skits making fun of Harford County and what was going on there. At the same time, we were working on getting Valerie a private attorney with assistance of an organization called the Aleph Institute, which assists Jewish prisoners. And we were successful in being able to retain Mr. Isaac Klein to represent Valerie. This was a blow to the prosecution because Klein, unlike Janowicz, could not be manipulated as easily, and the prosecution's plan, which I believe they had, which was to get her to plead NCR, they kind of had Janowicz a little bit sort of agreeing with them because of clearly, the fact that he had sent her to Spring Grove and had talked about, reasons why he thought she should she could plead NCR or should plead NCR, and continued to apparently focus on mental health reports. And another thing that kind of really disturbed me, that was something going on at the time, was that he told Valerie he did not intend to use Dr. Mills as a witness, which was very scary, because Dr. Mills testifies in high-profile criminal cases all over the country. He is very credible. He completely believed that Valerie was sane and wrote a very compelling report about discrediting the children's interviews. The fact that Janowicz didn't want to use him as a witness because he said that he was too much on his client's side and therefore lacked credibility was very scary. So we were very happy to get Isaac Klein on the case, and the prosecution was very unhappy. Then something interesting happened at that point, where now, well, many interesting things happened. In March of 2010, Valerie was suddenly charged with a new felony. She was charged with assaulting a correctional officer. This is kind of almost within like a week of her getting the new attorney. It almost seemed as if, they were trying to orchestrate things to make it really difficult for this guy to defend her. We didn't really know what happened initially, but we wanted Dr. Mills to see her as soon as possible after this event to get a sense from her of what had happened. And we also wanted to get the videotape of the incident, obviously. Well, we waited a very long time for the videotape, and finally we did get it. But in the meantime, Dr. Mills was trying to get in to see her, and the prosecution blocked Dr. Mills from getting into the jail, from going to the jail. They told Valerie's attorney that he needed a court order to have Dr. Mills see Valerie, and that was because Dr. Mills' visit was for the purpose of Valerie's defense and was going to be used in court. Well, that's nonsense. It is an absolute lie. There is no requirement that a lawyer or a physician needs a court order to see a jail inmate. We made inquiries around Maryland, and several jails told us there was no such policy, and that if the client's attorney wanted the doctor to see her, then he should just come and see her and show his medical credentials. That was it. So basically, the state's attorney lied to Mr. Klein about this court order requirements, obviously to make it difficult for him to defend his client, which is clear. Well, we were up in arms about that, and several advocates, myself included, my friend Michelle Etlin, and a couple of rabbis got involved, making calls, and finally got the county attorney to basically tell the state's attorney that he could not do this, and he had to let the doctor into the jail, which finally we accomplished with great effort and difficulty, because of the prosecution's effort to block the defense from to block the defense, basically. Then we finally got the videotapes, which were very poor, but I was able to work with them and enhance them, slow them down. And what is clear from the videotape, which I posted on YouTube, is that there's no evidence Valerie initiated an assault against this officer. Rather, he initiated assault against her and she, in the later part of what went on between them, you can see her fighting back, but he's sitting on top of her, and she's kind of like pummeling at him to try to get out from under. But that's not how it began. It's very clear in the beginning of the assault that he bashes her. You see him bashing her head into a concrete wall. That's very clear. A lot of the other parts of the video are a bit fuzzy, but that you definitely see. And you do not see her assaulting him. The state's attorney discounted the video, saying, well, whatever you saw in the video, never mind about that, because we have people who tell a different story. These were jail inmates who had been offered various privileges in exchange for their information. So again, it was pretty clear that there was no intention there for Valerie to have a fair trial, but in the meantime, we needed to at least deal with the 28 felonies and then deal with this latest development later. Then an interesting thing occurred. We received a letter. They were desperately trying to get us to take down the website. We received a letter from the Assistant Attorney General for Health and Human Services in Maryland, telling us that we couldn't keep the children's interviews on our website because that pertained to a private investigation, and that there were some legalities involved that made it, illegal for us to keep that information there. It seemed a bit odd since the prosecution was going to be using those interviews in the actual prosecution, but whatever. So we said, okay, we'll take the interviews down, which we did, but we continued to post on our website information about what was in the interviews. Apparently, it's not, since this was also in the charging documents, description of what was in the interviews or allegedly in the interviews, we kept information on the website that described the interviews, but not the actual interviews themselves with the names redacted. We took that down. But in the process of doing this, it suddenly struck us as rather curious that the Attorney General of Maryland, whose name was on the letterhead, had himself committed certain ethical violations when he was the state's attorney in Montgomery County, and had actually been disciplined by the Attorney Grievance Commission. And that little factoid led us to investigate the possibility of bringing grievances against the state's attorney in Harford County for similar things. Now, what Mr. Gansler was accused of was making extrajudicial statements. That is, he had spoken to the media about a case and discussed aspects of the case that had not been that had not been discussed in court, or that had not been in the actual charging documents. You'll notice when reporters talk about a pending criminal case, they will refer largely to what is in the charging documents, because that they can refer to, that's public information. Well, the state's attorney and the assistant state's attorney in Harford County had blabbed to the media about things that were clearly not in the charging documents, and in fact couldn't be found anywhere. And so we began with a complaint to the Grievance Commission, just referring to extrajudicial statements. Not at all sure that they would go forward with any kind of investigation, because I had actually previously, I didn't mention this, but previously I had tried to get the help from the governor's office to deal with the abuse that Valerie was going through in jail. The governor's office referred the case to the office of the state prosecutor. That is a special office that investigates illegal behavior or unethical behavior by state employees, which we believe these were. But the state prosecutor said that they couldn't do anything about it because it was something that they didn't investigate this type of issue, and said it would have to be investigated by the sheriff. So the sheriff, basically, whose people were the ones, perpetrating these crimes, was the one who got to investigate. And without kind of going into too much detail, essentially the sheriff asked a few questions, sent an investigator. The officer said, we didn't do anything. She was the one who assaulted us. And he accepted that, and that was it. And this happened numerous times during the period of Valerie's incarceration. I know I'm jumping around. But essentially, we were skeptical as to whether or not any authority would pay attention to the things that had been going on. But we thought, well, nothing to lose. Let's try it. Well, the Attorney Grievance Commission did appear to take these charges seriously.